Okay, we are live. This is the Yes California channel. My name is Marcus Ruiz Evans. I invented the concept of Calexit in 2011 with the book California's Next Century. I've been working on this for close to a decade. Recently, we were able to, as Yes California, reach out to 25% of all the candidates who declared themselves in the California recall election and 25 to 30% of all the ballot qualified candidates. Some of those candidates, including 10 of them, have agreed to be in discussions with us about the topic of secession. Now, most of them said that they disagreed, but they also said things that like, oh, I couldn't ever be separate from America, but we should totally have our own food, water, power, and everything and not dependent on anything for the American government. I called that's isolationism, which the South explored in 1860, but Californians don't see that as secession, although it's literally parallel and juncture. The other thing those 9 candidates said was, I don't believe in secession, but hey, why don't we just ignore and disregard federal laws as we see fit? And if they try to push a law on us that we don't like, we'll just withhold our federal tax money. That's called nullification and threat of financial usury, also last seen in 1860. So when we talked to 9 of the candidates, boy, were they against secession, but they were talking just like the South did right before the Civil War. What an incredible coincidence. We also had an interview with John Drake. We're following that up with another interview now with candidate Jackie McGowan. I understand you just did an interview with Republicans that went very well. Is that right?
Yes.
Yeah, okay, great. You're pleased with that interview. And we're going to talk about secession in California. You don't have to be for it. You don't have to be against it. Whatever you think. And we like having a conversation because, yes, California, we say this is the most key conversation that we need to be having here as the world's 5th largest economy and 40 million people. So let's start off with it. What's your general take of secession? Pro, con?
I think that, prior to running for governor, I was extremely anti-secession. And where I'm coming from is a perspective of how are we going to maintain our own military? How are we going to, make sure that we have funding for like all of our natural disasters? And we have natural disasters every single year, like whether it's fire, drought, like water, earthquakes, whatever, right? And so my fear of seceding is that we won't have enough of a bank account to sustain those costs. Given that like California goes through more natural disasters, I think, than any other state, but I could be wrong. Like that's just me coming from, a Californian perspective. That's where my fears lie. However, I've listened to a lot of the arguments and I've listened to, I just ran for governor and I've listened to a lot of different advisors across the spectrum, like Republican, Independent, Democrat, on all of these issues. And it was surprising and shocking to me to find out that a lot of my advisors really did want to secede. And, there wasn't a time where we could actually even debate it because we were all, in campaign hell. Like trying to cram a 2-year campaign into 68 days was maddening. But now that the campaign's over, I'm able to have these conversations and I'm able to actually digest some of this data. I still have that fear of seceding and, and not having that reservoir of money to back us up, like from some sort of natural disaster. I get where you guys are coming from completely, that like we give way more to the federal government than we receive. And we could probably lower taxes if we did this. However, we would have to become our own country. And so what does that mean, right? And what does day one look like of becoming our own country? It means we have to have our own military. It means that like we're not going to have any support from the federal government regarding anything. And so what is the cost analysis associated with that? Like I have no clue. I don't know how much we give versus how much we receive and in whatever form that looks like. And but I'm actually now willing to have that conversation when people are, when people talk about this issue, it's labeled as state of Jefferson and they're crazy, and they want to secede from the government and like not have roads and public schools and all of these things. And so because of the way that they've been labeled, I'm probably biased like in some of these aspects. However, I've learned so much on this campaign trail that like I now know I need to have my eyes completely wide open to any sort of solution, whether it be a third party, to actually, get the voice of the people out. Like I can't tell you how many of my friends do not feel represented by either party, and I'm one of them. Right? I'm registered as a Democrat, although I feel like I'm more of an independent, and I had to go draw from some sort of strength, and it killed me to re-register as an independent or as a Democrat like the day before I was filing. However, like I needed to do what made the most business sense, and that's where I am. Right? I really could identify with both parties right now. Because I come from a very conservative family, and I'm being ostracized by my conservative family right now because I ran as a Democrat, but it is what it is. But my conservative values are I will never waver on them. I am pro-business. I am I'm anti-regulation. I'm pro-cannabis. I'm pro-legalizing sex workers. I come from a very libertarian platform, and I'm not going to waver on any of that. Like, and I'm very pro-gun on top of all of that. Like, and so it makes me a very it's almost like I'm a unicorn Democrat, but I have very socially like liberal policy goals and solutions as well. So I thought I was marrying all of that together and running as a Democrat. However, this seceding thing was like kind of in the background of my platform the whole time. And I kept hearing about it. And I wasn't willing to debate it at that time. And now I am, like, let's talk about it. Like, what does it look like? And how long does it take? And like, what kind of money, would it actually mean? And, is it an initiative that has to get passed at the ballot? Like, and does it require 50 plus 1%, like to do that? How does this all work? Like, I don't know, because I've never even been willing to open my brain up to this conversation, because it came from this crazy perspective of just the same way the recall came, we thought it came from like anti-vaxxers. The secession movement, like normal voters think that the secession movement came from state of Jefferson crazies.
That's awesome. That's awesome. So recently we did an interview with John Wright, who worked in the Forest Department, and he was explaining how the federal government doesn't do a good job with the force, and he was backing secession. John Wright was one of the people that was one of the many people who supported Jackie during her campaign, was talking about secession. We at Yes California found that exciting because in February 2017, although we started in 2014, in February 2017, after Trump was elected, 32% of Californians said they supported full-blown automatic secession. 47.5%, according to Reuters, Ipsos, and Stanford Hoover Institute, two separate polls, same month, said that they were willing to discuss secession. 47.5%. The interesting thing about both those Reuters, Ipsos, and Stanford Hoover Institute studies was that they double counted elderly Caucasians and reduced the amount of Latino participant by 50%. Now, when you look at the demographic profiles of voters, young Latinos don't typically vote like elderly Caucasians. When you actually match the demographics of California in 2017 to those polls, it bumps up to 55% of Californians were not opposed to discussing secession. Now, the media reported that as 2/3 must be against it because 1/3 is for. That is not what the Reuters Ipsos poll and the Stanford University said. They asked, were you against it, not sure, or opposed? So if you're not sure about the topic of secession, it means you're open to it. We're not asking about if you want a chocolate bar. It's equivalent to saying, would you like to go commit a violent robbery and shoot a bunch of people? It's pretty extreme topics. And when we bring up secession, yeah, and people are saying I'm open to it. It's significant. 55% when you actually match the demographics were open to this topic. That's why we're still doing this. And when I meet people like John, and when I meet people like you, and you say other people are talking about this, and I've never met those humans, and I never met you before, and they're all saying the same thing, it backs up something that we said here, which is that third that believes is still out there. Now, maybe they dissipated in participation, but nobody ever stopped believing that unicorns are real. And when we see people who still believe it, and we've never met, it proves the concept, I think.
When, John Wright was my campaign father, and John and Jan took my entire campaign team in and donated a campaign headquarters to me in the form of a barn. And I had a war room, and I had a media room, and I had a tech room, and I had a crash room where, volunteers slept, and they kept like the entire campaign going. And we never talked about secession during the campaign because there wasn't time to talk about any of this. But after the campaign, John and I started to have some discussions about this. And I was like, wait, what? Can you explain to me like this secession? Because I think he's brilliant, and we both are really, truly independents and see both sides of everything. And so, campaign dad said, that he wanted to secede. And I'm like, I need to hear why you want to secede. And John went into some of those details that he talked about with you on your podcast recently, about how the federal government would come in during a major fire. And as soon as the major fire reached a certain size, the state was almost told to stand down, even though the state had a handle on it. And then the feds would come in and screw it all up. And the fire would go they would have it under control, and then it would go out of control. And he gave me multiple examples of that, not just with fire, but with other issues. And it opened my eyes. If John is telling me that he wants to secede, I need to listen, right? And I'm sorry, Marcus, but you had been saying, seceding was the answer, prior to this, and I couldn't hear it. And I couldn't hear anyone that said it before this. It took campaign dad, who I completely respect and appreciate, his intellect and his life experience. And so it was his life experiences with a lot of these different issues where he has multiple examples of experiences with the state running something and then the feds running something, and the two overlapping, and then it getting completely messed up. And so when he first saw your profile, he was like, I love him already. He's a secessionist. And I was like, he is? I don't even know. He's just a moderator, on one of my panels. Wait, what? and I didn't have the brain power or the time to even look into what your core values were or why John.
We didn't push it.
Huh?
We didn't, because we didn't push it. The recall debates had nothing to do with secession. We just wanted to provide a service. So the reason that you didn't know is because we didn't push it. We were consciously it was there, but we weren't trying to push that. We wanted to say, look, this is a fair debate for people to just present themselves as this. So and
I appreciate that. Why. If you had presented yourself as a secessionist during that time, I don't know that I would have participated.
Yeah.
And I don't know that I would have gotten the experience that I did. Your platform gave the opportunity to debate other candidates on the ticket. And it gave me experience in debate that I would never have gotten anywhere else because no one else invited me to any other debates. I'm one of 46 candidates. I came in 7th place, which is absolutely amazing. And I should be patting myself on the back, but I'm still pretty upset that I didn't finish higher. And I got to get over that. But the secession thing is a brand new topic that I was never willing to discuss because I associated secessionism with State of Jefferson crazies.
And that's what we try to do here in California. Is we try to, at Yes Californians, we try to bring people to facts because the mainstream news won't do it. And we try to make this conversation safe, which is what I think we did. So, we've talked to you, we've talked to Drake, we've talked to 8 other candidates, we talked to Fuji Shiora. A lot of people say the same thing. I thought this was whack job.
I did.
I actually met some of you, and you're like, you know, you don't have feet coming out of your forehead, and you're actually able to understand things like fiscal year summaries. That's not the image we get in the popular press. And I go, yeah, that's why we do this, because my family constantly is telling me, why do you keep doing this? Why don't you quit? And I go, because they never beat us. We've never actually had a fair debate. They've done lies and rumor mills and imagery to convince people we're something that we absolutely are not. And every time I meet real people, they go, whoa, you guys aren't brain dead? Like, no, we actually do this because we know what we're talking about. So I'm still waiting for that time when we get a real honest discussion in Californians. We cannot trust the mainstream news to do it. We saw that with the recall debates. They didn't do any of it. We did that here at Yes California. So we leave it up to Yes California to make sure the information gets to the public, because the news won't do it.
But Marcus, how do we actually have that honest conversation if mainstream media won't cover it? And, you know, I mean, given, yeah, but you have 15,000 followers. I have 5, you know,
sure,
like,
but
how are you and I going to get through to every Californian that this should actually be a discussion? You know, I'm not pro or anti right now.
Sure.
I'm actually like, I'm just assessing, right? Like,
that's all we want.
And my fear is, and I've told you this, like, you know, off camera, my fear is that California is super susceptible to like natural disasters, right? With whether it be fire, drought, climate change, earthquakes, okay? And so even if we did secede, and you and my campaign dad agree that, like, we give way more to the federal government than we receive, right? Even if that's true, we would need a reservoir of money, like, to like sustain us through. I'm certain that we're going to have an earthquake in the next few years, right? And how devastating is that earthquake going to be? On top of the fires that we have like, our fire season is going from like 3 months to 6 months to 9 months to almost a year long right now. And so we keep having to draw on those federal funds, and we're drawing on definitely what we've already paid and getting it back. However, what happens in that year that we don't have that reservoir, you know? And that's where my fear lies with this.
Absolutely.
My fear also lies with how in the world we educate enough of Californians to even vote for it. Because this, I would imagine this is a $20 million initiative, and who is going to pay for it, right? And who, like, even just getting signatures on the ballot, like, here's where, like, my experience as a cannabis policy expert comes into play. Every local initiative that I've watched over the last 7 years, like with cannabis, the industry gets super invigorated, and they draw in, you know, enough money just to get the signatures and get an initiative on the ballot to allow whatever they want at the local level. And then they fail in raising more money to advertise for that campaign. And they think that the entire battle is won just by getting an initiative on the ballot, and it isn't, right? That's half the battle. And maybe it's not even half. It could be like a third of the battle, right? Where 2/3 of the battle is won through changing hearts and minds, and creating allies, like across party lines, across spectrums of business, you know, churches, you know, food banks, you know, all of these different entities that you have to team up with in order to get that initiative actually passed, right? And that's where and I've been screaming this from the rooftops about cannabis and policy for 7 years. Like, the industry is super awesome about getting something on the ballot, and then they fail on getting it passed. Like, the majority of our local initiatives fail because everyone thinks that the battle's won just by getting it on the ballot, and it's not, right? You still have to win hearts and minds. You have to get people to vote for it, right? And so that's where my trepidation lies with secession. You know, who's going to pay for it? Number one, it doesn't matter if you get it on a ballot. It doesn't even matter. Who's going to continue to fund it and continue to work on an educational platform to get people to vote for it? Who's work on creating the allies that are needed, you know, to make sure that like that initiative passes with 50 plus 1% of the vote, right?
Sure.
And so to me, secessionism sounds like a pipe dream. And I'm sorry to,
Well,
use
can I start addressing some of the questions? But before we go super, so we're already up to 3 questions. Can I start knocking some of those down just so the viewers can follow along?
Okay.
So I think I heard you. The first one is the military. If you're independent, what are you going to do for national defense? Second one is what about natural disasters using the federal insurance policy, as they call it? And then the third one is how do you actually get it passed, knowing the mechanisms of how elections are won here in California?
Thank you
fair summary?
for summarizing that. That's perfect. Okay. Yes.
The first one for natural disasters is that we don't get any help. So you can go back to the earthquake in Northridge, and we did not get the amount of assistance that we needed. Governor Wilson criticized the federal government for not coming through. The next thing you can look at is the 1992 recession, which hit California worse than anyone else. It was called the dot-com bust. We got nothing under President Clinton, although he promised during his campaign that he would give us. The second instance we're going to need to go to is the 2008 global recession, where Barack Obama said that he was not going to give us anything after Governor Schwarzenegger personally pleaded with him. So you had 2 recessions where California was hit worst. Clinton and Obama both said, tough, you're totally on your own, and we're going to give you absolutely nothing at all.
Recessions are absolutely different than natural disasters. And so if you can't give me data that supports like how we've been, like shortchanged on natural disasters, then I can't have this argument with you.
Fair enough. I wasn't done.
Okay.
So I also mentioned the Northridge earthquake. There's also the fire season. So Schwarzenegger pleaded for help with Bush under fire season. He didn't get it. The forest fires also exacerbated under Barack Obama, so we did not get enough of it. Donald Trump cut funding to forest fires, and Joe Biden did not fund the federal forest fires to the equivalent amount needed to make sure that we had the support. So that's 4 presidents in a row, and every single one of them has completely failed to provide us adequate fire support. 2 Democrats, 2 Republicans. When we look at earthquakes, you can look at the Loma Prieta in Oakland. You can also look at the Northridge in Southern California. And both times, we did not actually get the federal disaster assistance that we needed. The other thing is that we can look at preventative maintenance. So there's the disaster of the levee over Sacramento is as unstable as the one over New Orleans, according to the federal government. And if it collapsed due to a flood, it would cause equivalent loss of life as New Orleans. Federal government's known about that for 10 years and they've done nothing. So we've gone through 2 earthquakes and we got nothing. We've gone through 2 recessions and we've gotten nothing. And any other natural disaster that you can mention, I can point out where the federal government did not come through. So the fact is that for 20 to 30 years, we've not gotten anything in disaster assistance. Why should we believe that they're going to come through? Additionally, I would also point out the 9/11. I know that's not a natural disaster, but that's a disaster. The Department of Homeland Security said the most vulnerable to terrorist attack place in all of America was California. And we had to wait 5 years to get any money to defend ourselves from nuclear attack, even though Michael Chertoff said. So terrorist attacks, nothing. Recession attacks, nothing. Earthquakes, nothing. Forest fires, nothing.
Okay, so
tell me the natural disaster or other disaster where we get anything.
Tell me this. We vote to secede, and we're our own country, right? Mm-hmm. And we now have our own military, and we are responsible for ourselves completely, right? What happens when we have a natural disaster? Who do we rely on to bail us out of that natural disaster? You tell me how to solve that problem, and I'm in.
Sure. So a lot of natural disasters, operate on the budget of, 1 to 2 billion, maybe 30 to 70 billion if you're looking at hurricanes or things like that. The fact is that California, according to our governor, now he's saying it's a $70 billion surplus, but it's only a $40 billion surplus. He just took out a loan for $30 billion. When you're the world's 5th largest economy, you can take out loans. And almost all developed nations on the planet that are independent nations are able to do what's called debt financing, meaning that the country says, with the full faith and credit of our government, we'll take out loans and we promise to pay you back. America does this. Japan does this to like 300% of their actual percentage. America, I think, is over 100% over what is actually valued. So countries can automatically take out loans simply because they're a sovereign nation and say, we're sovereign, give us money, and it happens. Every single nation on earth is able to do that. It's called sovereign debt financing. We would be able to do that because we're the world's 5th largest economy. Additionally, California just invented the California State Bank, which would allow us to start internalizing our own tax revenue and would create one of the, I think, the 5th largest national bank on the earth within 2 years of us being able to fund it all on our own. Now, we can't have that national bank as long as we're part of America because of federal banking regulations. So we could actually have a national bank that could fund these things and create debt financing only if we're independent. And even if we were independent, every country on earth is able to go into debt. I'm sorry?
How quickly can all of that happen?
The Legislative Analyst Office estimated about 1.5 years to get the state bank up and running. However, California could probably take on debt the second it's independent. A lot of bankers, frankly, like buying sovereign debt because you get like ridiculous terms. The government will say, hey, we'll pay whatever terms you want. We just want cash right now. So a lot of buyers buy treasury bills and other things, particularly because the federal government's not good at managing them.
How do we convince the general public to vote for this?
And
who is going to fund like that? That's one of the 4 things that you left out. Like you came up with a good summary, but you have not like answered the question about who's going to fund this, who is going to put it on the ballot, and who. Like, it's not just a matter of signature gathering. It's a matter of an entire marketing campaign, right? To get people to vote for it. And so like it might cost $20 million just to get it on the ballot. It's going to cost another $50 million in like, you know, a marketing campaign. Who is paying for that? And who is your opposition to that? And so it doesn't even matter if you think you have $70 million lined up. If you don't know who your opposition is and how much they're going to fund, like opposing this, then like the fight is null and void, like dumb, right? Like,
yeah.
I've only just learned that like on my own campaign trail. Like, how stupid was I? I didn't raise $20 million. Like, you know, how did I think I could win? You know, and so I, you know, because I've only come to this conclusion in my own race. Like, how in the world are you going to fund this, and who's going to fund it, and who's your opposition? Those are really good questions.
I think they are too, and I didn't not answer them. I just didn't get to it.
I know.
The questions. So the second one was the military. The military is easy. So America leases bases in 150 countries. There's only 210 nations on Earth. America leases bases. You didn't have to cut your video feed. America leases.
That's why.
So
I'm smoking a joint.
3/4 of the countries on Earth have an American military base on them, and America pays them hundreds of millions of dollars for that. If 3/4 of the nations have a lease, why can't we have a lease? And when we talk to Californians about independence, nobody's saying, hey, I want to be independent because I want our own separate California military. They want the policy independence. They don't really care what happens with the American military. Now, you don't have to take my opinion, but we've done the most conversations with the most Californians about this. There really isn't a real push for that. So
like you're dancing around it. Like I look forward to actually answering the questions that I asked. Who is funding the money to get the initiative on the ballot? Yep. Who is funding the marketing campaign to make sure that it passes?
Mm-hmm. I wasn't done with the military question yet.
Like you're not answering the questions.
I'm no, that's incorrect. So I haven't gotten to the question yet.
Okay.
I'm answering the military question because I wanted so that the viewers can follow along. So we would allow leasing. That's how the military would stay here. The military does this with many people. And secondly, the way that we're pursuing secession would be through a vote of a majority of the states. So if a majority of the states said it's okay for us to go, we believe that we'd have natural alliances with the United States military and that they would pursue this. Secondly, I'm sorry.
Back up. We need a vote of all states?
No.
It's not a California vote?
So yes, California has said, and we've actually gotten the media to back down and admit we were right after they said we didn't know what we were talking about. It took about 2.5 years, but we got them to do that. There's a Supreme Court case called Texas versus White. It's the only one in America that talks about secession. The Constitution says that for all legal disputes, there's only one person who can decide, the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court has only looked at secession once. It was after the Civil War. And it was in a case called Texas versus White where they said, if you get consent of the states, you can secede. Now, a lot of professors came out when we got really big and said, oh, that must mean an amendment. Salmon Chase was the Supreme Court judge who oversaw Texas versus White. He was appointed by Lincoln and lived through the Civil War. The amendment process had been around for 100 years. How did a legal scholar accidentally forget to use that word? Maybe it's because he didn't mean amendment. He just meant a simple majority. Erwin Chemerinsky, who's the default constitutional scholar of the most preeminence here in California, furthermore backed it up and said that since a simple majority in Congress, 51% allowed California into the Union, a simple majority could allow us to go. So we're saying we only need 25 states, in addition to ourselves, to allow us to legally secede peacefully. And if we did it on those terms, there'd be no reason we couldn't have military alliances. I can move on to the money question now.
Okay. I'm listening.
Sounds good. Sounds good. And thank you so much for having this discussion.
I thought it was local, state ballot initiative, not local, but state ballot initiative, and money to fund that, and signatures to get that on the ballot. And I did not know that this was a congressional play.
Well, there's
so continue, please. I'm happy to be educated.
Well, there's parts to it. So we follow international law. We're very committed to not sounding like crazy Jeffersonians and saying we're about following a legal process defined in law so that we can say that we're peaceful. Because that's what people say is you're going to get your pitchfork and go out there and go, whoa. Supreme Court, laws,
right.
law, using law. So basically under international precedent, when you look at Scotland, England, I think Denmark and others, a lot of them have what's known as a plebiscite, basically a vote of the people, where a majority. In England, it was 55%, I think, said they're ready to secede. If you get a majority of the public saying you want to secede, then the governor and the California government would have to, at that point, go to Congress and ask for permission for the following 25. So you're right. There is an initiative. You got to have the initiative first. You got to have a majority of Californians say they want it.
Back up.
Okay.
What kind of initiative? What kind of funding? Who's sponsoring it?
Sure. So we have filed an initiative to have California secede about 5 times. And we had it approved by 3 different California attorney generals. I just think it's important to point out that it is legal for us to do this. Kamala Harris approved of this personally, Kathleen Keenly and Javier Becerra. So if 2 people who can be vice president and Homeland Security secretary can do this and they said it's legal, maybe they know what they're talking about, because they did. And that's documented. 3 separate attorney generals said that we were right when other people said this could never happen, and they approved of the text of our initiative. We did not qualify it to go for the ballot. You're absolutely right. We didn't have the money, we didn't have the signatures, and we totally failed 3 to 5 times in a row. You're 100% correct. Weren't able to get the money. We were being called Russian spies. We lost $100,000 in about a week. People stopped doing our interviews. Rachel Maddow had a screenshot of me on her show where she talked about how, we like white supremacy and we hate democracy. So yeah, when you do that, they can really destroy your name and your reputation and any of your contacts and your funding. And that absolutely happened to us. And we absolutely didn't get those previous initiatives filed. However, I'd like to bring up stem cell. So the stem cell initiative passed last year during the coronavirus pandemic, when it was exceptionally hard to go out and collect signatures. They were allowed by the California government to simply allow people to print off the initiative, sign it, and mail it in. Now, they didn't get all the signatures they needed, but they got about half. The moment they got half, a millionaire literally came out of the woodwork and gave them all the rest of the money they need to hire paid signature gatherers. That's not a singular instance. It happened with 2 other things that qualified by initiatives here in California that were radical when they passed. I would ask you to jump into a time machine and go back 10 years. There was something called the right for gay people to get married. And there was something called the legalization of cannabis. Both of those were called radical, nut job, insane things that would never happen. I've been here for a while. I know how people talked. Never going to have legalization. Never going to let LGBTQ people believe that. Yeah, they said that. Yeah, they believed it. Both of those things are law now. And how did they happen? By the initiative process. So both times you had a group get half of the signatures for the initiative.
Funded, Marcus.
I'm not done answering, with respect. We can have a debate, but at least let me get the facts out.
Okay, well, I'm sorry.
Okay. So, cannabis, half the signatures. And then there was a guy called Sean Parker who invented Napster. He's a tech billionaire. And he gave them the other $2.5 million to collect signatures. It did go on the ballot. And because it finally made it on the ballot after 7 failed attempts, that alone did cause enough of a stir that they did get the votes to actually make that happen. So that was an instance where they got a fraction of the signatures that got them millions of dollars. The fact that they got it on the ballot was enough to excite the people, and that did cause it to go in. The second one I want to bring up is LGBTQ. Same thing. They got half the signatures, and it was a millionaire, I think it was a billionaire, who started a tech company out of New York City. He's not even a Californian. He gave them the 2.5 million to get the rest of the signatures. That too passed because it was on the ballot. Then we go to stem cell research, which also got $1 million. Peter Thiel and Shervin Pishavar are both billionaires in the technology industry who both said they donate to a Calexit initiative if it got that far. So we have 3 initiatives where people got half the signatures, millions of dollars instantly came, and because they were so radical, they did qualify for the vote. And we have 2 billionaires who are also in the tech industry who said they do the same thing.
Do you think those billionaires are still there?
Peter Thiel and Pishwar they're alive. They exist.
No, but do you think that they're still there with this like initiative and this idea?
I think that the fact that
that's how you win, right?
Yeah.
I'm all about like outside the box thinking and whatnot. But if the money and the strategy doesn't, equate to like a success, then I'm not, right? And so
I agree.
That's pretty much why I've had the trepidation that I've had, right?
Absolutely.
One, coming from like, everyone that's a secessionist is like, a state of Jefferson and like crazy. And 2, like, where the fuck is the money going to come from?
Billions of dollars is enough to fund it on their own. Each one, we had 2, and they both said they back Calexit. We also have examples of 2 different initiatives where they got a fraction of the signatures.
All right, so what are you waiting for?
That is enough to qualify.
What are you waiting for?
We're waiting to get our reputation back because people said I'm a white supremacist who has a direct line to Vladimir Putin and $1 million in my pocket. It's a little bit difficult to come back from that. Sorry. I'm Mexican. So, I go and talk to people. I mean, look at the hair. Look at the hair. Look at the skin tone. I still have people go and go, are you Russian? Do you work for the Russian government?
Are you serious?
Idiots.
Oh my goodness.
Idiots. That's what's holding us up. We were called Russian spies. Rachel Maddow said we were all Russian spies. San Francisco Chronicle, LA Times, San Jose Mercury, my friends, my family. And then we were white supremacists after that. We lost all of our money. We lost all of our contacts. And you cannot fund an initiative if you lose $100,000 in a week and nobody returns your calls. So the money was there.
Well aware.
They destroyed us with the reputation. Now, fortunately, in that time, Rachel Maddow has been proven by a federal court to be nothing but a liar. In fact, it was a federal court of law that said she's an entertainment channel and not to be taken as a news channel. And MSNBC said the exact same thing. So she should be seen as a liar and not real. And she said that because she said someone was taking money from the Russian government, and she had 0 evidence to back that up. We now have evidence to say this is a liar who makes things up. We didn't have that 3 years ago. That court case happened in the last 5 months. So we also were told that we're Russian spies and we're all this stuff. We had to wait for the Senate Select Intelligence Committee and the House Committee to clear us of investigation and the Mueller report. And then we also had to be investigated by the FPPC here in California, who assumed that we were getting money from Russian government. They subpoenaed our bank accounts, looked into it, and dropped the whole case. So it wasn't until we had 2 federal, 1 state, and 1 federal court case saying there's nothing to this before we could actually start to improve our name. And that didn't happen until the last year. And I remember 2017. You're a Russian spy. Where's the evidence? It's coming. It's coming. That was it. I can accuse you of this because I know it's true and I know the evidence will be here. No evidence. Mueller report, Senate Select Committee, FPPC investigation, Rachel Maddow, all liars, all had nothing to do with us, all disproved it, but it was years after the rumor mill, and something happens in America where they never go back and say, we were wrong, and we totally lied to you about weapons of mass destruction, Russia Gate, the fact that Biden's son, that we released that report right before the election, was true. So this is a history of we just make things up, destroy your name, never fix it, even though when the truth comes out. I personally emailed 45 reporters, every single person who processed those lies. And I gave them the links to every single report and said, can you at least just add a correction? Zero response. Casey Michelle was one of the premier reporters who trashed our name. He refused to report on all the evidence clearing our name.
I'm going to interrupt you just for a second because I can back up like what you're going through or what you've gone through with like what I went through on the campaign trail. You know, I was completely suppressed, like with mainstream media, and not just suppressed with mainstream media. Like as soon as I pivoted and tried to go own social media, I was shut down on social media too. And, you know, every time I got close to a TikTok star and they would start, you know, doing videos with me, they would get shut down. Anytime like someone with a large amount of followers on Instagram would post that they were voting for me, they would get shut down. And I got my Twitter account shut down. I got my Facebook account shut down. I've never had this happen. And I've run a cannabis group on Facebook for 7 years. I've never once been shut down until I ran for governor. And so I understand like suppression, and I understand like, you know, the mainstream media and you know, social media like not wanting you to tell your story. And so how are you planning to break through what I've just gone through, right, with your own initiative, right? And so if you don't have $100 million, and I don't even know how much it is, right? I don't know how much this is going to cost, but like if you don't know who your opposition is, then you don't even know what fight you're entering, right? And you don't even know how much it's going to cost you to win, right? And so who is your opposition is a better question for us to spend the last like 5 minutes that I think that we have. Like my computer's about to die. I don't have a charger right now. So
what I can do, so the plan is to wait. We think midterms are going to go to the red team, and we think Californians are literally going to flip out. So I mean, if you want to stick around, I can go over analysis. But basically, when Donald Trump won,
get a computer charger in order to like continue the conversation. But
basically,
you think the midterms are going to Republicans?
Hardcore.
Why?
Because Joe Biden is tanking horribly, and the Democrats have lied about everything they said they're going to do. They're losing their liberal base. The economy's going in trash. Biden. Percent of support for him on COVID is now equivalent to Trump's level. His support on the economy is below 50%. His mandate thing blew up in his face. Afghanistan blew up in their face. And the Democratic Party screwed over the liberal wing in order to get into power. That's totally open right now. And so when it comes midterms, the liberals are going to do punishment. The Republicans know that half the lies they said about Trump were disproven, and they'll be able to claim the House.
I agree with everything that you're saying. However, I'm being consulted by like Republican strategists that are telling me don't even consider running as a Republican.
In California.
Power's not there. In California. Right.
That's what we're talking about. We're talking about national race. So both can be true.
We're talking about a national race, but we're talking about a California issue, right? And so where's the money? You haven't answered this question. Where the money is going to come from just to even get this on a ballot, and where the support is going to come from to get it passed, right? Like an educational campaign.
Sure,
like
sure.
Signature gathering, one component. Educational campaign, another component.
Mm-hmm.
Who the fuck is paying for that? And who is paying for it? And who is our opposition? And if you understand those things, then you shouldn't go into any battle.
Right? Hopefully I do. Yeah, right. So
I went into battle not knowing these things, like not knowing that, like, you know, I'd be suppressed by mainstream media, not knowing that, like, you know, not feeding the media machine would get me suppressed, not knowing that not feeding the media machine would get me suppressed on social media, right? Like I didn't know these things. And so now that I know these things, how in the world are you going to clear those hurdles?
Sure. So in 2017, Donald Trump became president. And the California legislature literally said, America's a foreign nation. There's a joint declaration by the Sacramento government. That's not one or two people. That's about 300 all elected officials who referred to America as a foreign country when Donald Trump was elected. I was there in the Capitol that day. People lost their minds. There was literally people crying on the streets of the Capitol. It looked like a war zone had gone off. I mean, people really lost it and didn't handle it well. People view Donald Trump as the anathema to everything we stand for here in California. That's why they lost it. We literally went from a group of 10,000 people to 200,000 in 2 weeks, with nobody talking about us, to 32% backing up our idea, with no one covering us other than 2 LA Times articles to 13 different countries, the New York Times, the Washington Post, and I was invited to go to Wall Street and ring the bell. So when bad things happen in America and Californians flip out, they go to Radical Solutions and we automatically get millions of dollars in what's called earned free media. Went through it in 2017. We're expecting it to happen again. Now, we can argue about whether that will happen again. That's fine. But the fact is that it did already happen. It already happened, went out. We were the only group ready with a message to answer when people were dismayed. I remember being there in the Capitol the day Trump won. The media we had 50 different reporters swarming us. We've never seen anything like that. We grew from here to here in about 2 weeks after he won. All we need is another election in America that Californians go, whoa, I didn't know we're tied to those people. And then they'll freak out and they'll literally give us everything we need because it already happened last time.
And how much do you need? Who is your opposition? You have not answered all of my questions yet.
Because it takes a little bit of time to get through everything. So
I know.
Okay. So the opposite
with my set of questions, like
sure.
At least I outlined how you think you can win. But you have not outlined how much it's going to cost to win. You have not outlined who is going to fund your cost to win and what that looks like. And so
I did outline who's going to fund.
I can't support this, right? Like I'm having the conversation, but like I'm a realist, and well,
that's why I have it recorded. So the audience can decide if the questions were answered or not. I did mention there were
I'm a realist, on another level, right? Like
absolutely.
I don't know that I went into a gubernatorial race naive, and thank God I was naive as I was, because if I wasn't as naive as I was, I wouldn't have entered that race. But now knowing what I know, I would never enter another race without having all of that lined up. And so there's still 2/3 of the question, like my primary question, that you haven't answered. And I'm going to give you time to do that.
So I had said that we would collect signatures off grassroots people, and that there's 3 examples of that doing. You don't need money for that. You just need an audience. We have 200,000 people that happen 3 times in a row. You can disagree with me, but that
in signatures, you think you can get grassroots?
No, I didn't say that. I said that's not what I said. I said we could get a couple 100,000, which would be enough to show $4 million to come. And I identified 2 billionaires who said they would back it. So I did identify the money and I did identify the process.
By grassroots getting a couple $100,000 is going to lure a financial backer into funding the rest of this plan.
I think that if we get a couple 100,000 signatures, the millionaires will come out of the woodwork and fund it. I think they
didn't show up.
It's a totally different concept. And everything I'm saying is based upon examples that this already happened. The fact is that if we weren't called Russian spies, we would have had the money, we would have qualified it. And the fact is that we just filed the initiative and got news and New York Times calling. My God, if it actually was up for a vote, can you imagine? We just filed paperwork. And Japan, England, France, Russia, China, New York Times, New York Post, Washington Post, DC, Wall Street were calling and going, oh my God, what's going to happen? We just filed paperwork. If this thing got on the vote, wow, it's next level. And there's going to be an election coming, and the vote's not going to go the way Californians are going to go. Believe.
Okay, I'm going to
view it as
fast forward to 2/3 of my last question. Who the fuck is your opposition?
Okay. So I'm going to go back to the February 2017. Half the opposition was the California Democrats, but half the people supporting it were the Democrats of California. So the opposition is going to come from the same group that it's for. There's basically people who like their political position. They have it nice and sweet. They already work with the federal government. If we're seceded, they lose power and money. People like Feinstein, senators. other aides, vice presidents, etc., or consulting firms who work for DC. They don't like this and they would be against it. However, there's another fleet of politicians who've never made it to the federal level, and they're just trying to grow in races and keep getting elected. We had 12 different statewide politicians say, screw the feds, let's do things on our own, the moment they realized Calexit was popular. So I would call it a, are you tied to the federal government, California Dem politician, versus you're not tied to them and you're only interested in domestic races. Also, the fact is that we got really generous titles for our initiatives by Javier Becerra, the Attorney General of the official California government. He gave us perfect titles for our initiatives, almost like they wanted to make it happen. And they made sure that it was released on 4/20, a date to give us additional publicity boosts. So we're like, oh, isn't that interesting? We can't prove anything, but we keep having California government officials during the time of Trump doing things that seemingly help us get even more attention and publicity, almost like members of the California government support this but can't publicly say so. When we look at the fact that Arnold Schwarzenegger, Gavin Newsom, and Jerry Brown all called California a sovereign nation, perhaps it says something about the amount of support we would get.
That's a roundabout answer, and I'm happy to get the roundabout answer finally. But like, the $100 million, like, where that's going to come from is still not answered. And
I think I did twice.
Both know that's what it's going to cost.
Fair enough. Well, let's leave it up to the comments. Did I answer the questions or did I not?
Wait, especially if you think that the Democratic Party is your number one opposition to this. Half, even if it's half of the Democratic Party, whether it's the California Dems, whether it's the National Dems, whoever it is, that's at least $50 to $100 million. And if you don't have someone in your pocket to like fund this, then the idea is a pipe dream, right? And that's, I can't waste any more of my time on pipe dreams. I just wasted 68 days on a pipe dream, and I was totally naive to what I was up against, and now that I've learned what I learned, I would never go into any other area without a big backing of money. When I reached out to my Wall Street mentors in Chicago, and I have Wall Street mentors in Chicago and New York, because I spent 9 years in Chicago and 9 years in New York. And when I reached out to my Wall Street mentors in Chicago, the guys that taught me everything I know about the stock market, they were like, Jackie, you need $20 million to win. I can't give you $100 grand. I can't give you $200 grand. I would never waste my money that way. And I'm like, you think I need that kind of money? I don't think I need that kind of money. And they were right in one aspect. They were right that I needed a lot of money to win. They were wrong that I needed 20 million to win. They were I needed $101 million to win, right? Because Newsom raised 100. And so if you don't outmatch your opponent financially, you're not going to succeed. And so I would love to have this conversation. I'd love to continue this conversation. However, if there isn't financial backing for it, then it's not worth having the discussion. That's where I'm coming from.
Fair enough. I feel I answered the question. I'll leave it up to the viewers to decide if I did or didn't. The viewers decide. That's why I like it.
Come from? You just said there's donors out there. You did not say specifically where the money is going to come from and who are. You also did not completely answer the question about who our opponents are. If I chose to take this side and I want to secede, and this is my position, then who am I up against? And how much money do I have to defeat? Mm-hmm. Those questions have not completely been answered. You've given elusive answers the same way. I love to say that Nicole Elliott is the director of the Department of Cannabis Control, and she is a ballerina when it comes to questions that specific questions about cannabis policy, and she dances around them. And I feel like you just danced around them.
You're entitled to whatever you want to feel. I feel that I answered it, and I feel that that's why we do recordings. And I think that the people that watch this are going to back me up. So let's find out. Let's take it to the video. Let's take it to the audience and see, did I evade the questions or did I answer them?
Did you? Answer them again?
Yes, I think I did.
Yeah. Who is funding the 100 million?
I'm
And
not going to repeat myself. We already did this 3 times. I gave the answers 3 times.
really?
So, yeah.
Nay.
You don't have to agree. We just wanted to have a debate, friendly conversation. We'll leave it there. Might have mean you to quit so early. Jackie? Okay, well, that seems to be an abrupt end to the debate. If I did not answer those questions and you honestly feel that way, please tell me. Here's my email. It's marcus.ruiz.evans@gmail.com. So I feel that I answered them well. I think I gave the answers. I think we were starting to get into maybe like further levels of detail, but I think I did answer them and I didn't evade it. If you feel that I was wrong, please email me. I don't want to be right. I want to get the data correct. All of you know me. That's what it's about. So email me and tell me if all the questions were answered or if they were not. If you honestly feel they were not, please tell me. And I want to be forced to address them. Okay. Thank you.